What's up, Kevin?
What's up, Stu? How you doing today?
Good. What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about how to break through self-imposed limitations. We talked about this before in a previous podcast episode, which we'll link up here. But if you haven't, we're going to cover a lot of this topic again in this episode.
Yeah, we felt this was such an important topic, and I think it really resonated with a lot of people that it just deserved another double down on this specific topic.
Absolutely.
So let's, as we do, let's start off by defining kind of what self-imposed limitation means to you.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think self-imposed limitations are things that you put upon yourself. It could be a belief. It could be self-talk. It could be the way that you treat yourself. It's self-imposed, right? And it's a limitation. So what's being limited, right? Subconsciously or consciously, you want something else, but because you've created this belief, it's preventing you from achieve what you truly want, right? And that's, in a nutshell, what self-imposed limitation is. Yeah. I mean, and that's what I think. Anything to add to that?
I think you've hit it right on the head. The only thing that I would add to that is probably in a more condensed format, like the voice in your head that says, no, I cannot do this, before you've even set out to do it. So I think that's really what it
That's a simple definition. I like that a lot better.
That's what it boils down to. But no, yours goes into a lot more detail and depth. But I think for me, at least, it's no, I can't do this before you've actually done it.
Yeah. And
we kind of want to talk about why that is, and how to break out of that cage, because really all that is just a cage. I like to visualize your brain, your spirit, your soul is like a lion, right? And you're that lion trapped inside an invisible cage. It's kind of like I wouldn't say it's a cage. I would say it's like a line with a square or circle drawn around whatever animal or beast that you want to embody, and you refuse to cross that line, not because there's a physical barrier there, but just because there's a line right there. I can't cross that line. I should not step out of that line because it's dangerous, it's scary. Or society drew that line for me in this border, and I better stick within the confines of this, otherwise there's repercussions.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the reasons why people don't step out of that line, kind of the way you were describing it, is like a lot of it is because of uncertainty and fear. Uncertainty of what's going to happen outside of that line, and fear as to any potential repercussions or consequences that may happen when you step out of that line. I think a lot of that comes from imagination, though, and the imagination of what that might be, right? But I think what will be super helpful before we dive deeper into what that is, I think it'll be good to kind of give some examples of what self-imposed limitations are. Like what are some that maybe we had or still have? I mean, can you think of any off the top of your head?
For sure. I think in our previous episode, one of our previous episodes, we talked about, what happens when you're struggling or you face uncertainty. And for me, I worked at Tesla, for a long period of time. And before I went into that company, I knew nothing about cars. I had majored in something that had nothing to do with transportation, electrical cars, just like no background whatsoever, right? I have never really been in the service industry, so I have no real customer service experience skills, right? And I hadn't finished college yet, and I was still taking classes, right? So what I'm kind of layering and setting up for you guys is like, these are easily self-imposed limitations that I could have said, because of these reasons, I'm just not going to do it. I don't have enough time. It's too hard. I'm too young. I have no knowledge and no experience. I'm not even going to try to attempt that, right? But I think what helped me break through that imposed limitation was the desire. I think you're either propelled by fear or you're propelled by desire. And the desire for me was wanting to make a difference, wanting to, as altruistic as it sounds, for me at that time, I wanted to work for a company that I felt was going to actually make a difference in the world. You know, that's actually solving a real problem that cannot be ignored. You know, and so that desire outweighed the fears, the self-imposed limitations that I gave myself. And that's kind of like an example. Do you have an example that you want to shed?
I really like that one. Yeah. I think for me, a lot of my life it's been a little bit more overarching. Not a very close or recent example like comes up to my head, but I will say common ones are I'm not good enough. I'm too young. I think those are the two primary ones that happen in my head a lot, right? I think too young as in, oh, you know, maybe I'm not qualified for this role. I'm not qualified to speak on this. I'm not qualified to, I don't know, whatever dumb excuse that I have, like be successful, right? And then I'm not good enough. I think it's a subconscious one where it's like, it kind of shatters your confidence to do certain things in life that you normally wouldn't do, right? I think in that previous episode, we talked about like just hopping on, recording this video, recording this podcast.
Putting yourself out there.
Putting yourself out there was already kind of difficult in the beginning, right? I think we both broke through that together. And, you know, if you yourself have thought about creating something like this or creating your own channel, it is a hard barrier to jump, right? Because you're putting yourself out there. It's like, hey, who would listen to this? Who would care about this proposition or this idea or my viewpoint on what I have to share, right? At the end of the day, it's like, hey, if no one watches or cares, that's fine. But at least I'm making that jump to conquer that fear.
And you're also putting your truth out there.
Exactly.
You're speaking your truth.
Yeah.
I will add another one too. Like when we first started, I would always joke with you, like, man, is that really what I sound like on an audio recording? Like your voice never sounds the way you think it does. You never look exactly the way you think you do in a video or like a audio format. But it's to your point, like you've got to just break through those barriers and just do it by repetition.
Yeah.
And I want to get your take on this. I just had a unique thought about a self-imposed limitation. Do you think a lot of times it has to do with our own ego, that we think we should be at this kind of level, but because we aren't at that level yet, or we're entitled to be at that level yet, that we just don't embark on it?
I think partially depends on the person, right? But I think in our case, I think a large portion it does have to play with ego, because
let's talk about the ego piece.
So with the ego piece, I think is you want to protect it, right? And that ego of protection of confidence, right? This false sense of confidence.
Like I'm good at everything that I do.
Correct. And and being vulnerable kind of keeps that ego out there to kind of be shattered almost, right?
Right.
It kind of like feels that way.
It's like the fear of sucking at something.
Exactly. The fear of failure.
The fear of sucking.
Yeah.
I think one way to kind of get across that border is to force yourself to do something that you aren't necessarily good at or that you suck at. Not to torture yourself, you know, in that respect, but to challenge that muscle in you to get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah. I want to say the flip side too, because I think it's also really important. So the reason I say partially it's ego, I think partially it could also be circumstantial for a lot of people.
Yes.
Right? And based off of the circumstances that they grew up in. And because they grew up in certain circumstances, they think that's going to dictate their future.
Right. Whether the social economical situation or whatever perspective that parents or whoever has raised you has kind of given you.
Correct.
You know, you're stuck in that narrative, that dialogue.
And it's very hard when you don't have an example, right? And like if you all your life you see that your mom's on drugs, your dad's on drugs, or he went to jail or whatever, and you don't have good role models in your life, it's very hard to even think on the path of, oh, I want to break through my self-imposed limitations, because you don't even see that they're there.
Because it's just like a clusterfuck, you know? You have all these things you've got to deal with. And that's so true.
Here's a good one, I think, is how do you identify that you have a self-imposed limitation? Because I think a lot of the times,
but that's the tricky part, isn't it?
It's hidden.
You don't even know.
You don't know you have it.
You don't know it.
Yeah. That's really tricky, right? But I think one sign that I've realized is I'm frustrated.
Okay.
Right? And if I'm frustrated and I'm consistently frustrated about the same thing, but I know and I don't know what's holding me back, then I know there's something there. Right? There's something there that I need to further explore.
It's like, why am I so not satisfied with myself? Why do I feel trapped in a sense?
Yeah. Or if I feel consistently unhappy, just generally, my overall mood is unhappy, then it's either A, I just let it be, or B, I ask, hey, why am I unhappy? And then you go through that process, and I think that can kind of help start to open up the idea of what your self-imposed limitations are. I mean, what do you think?
I think that's so true. Now that I'm thinking about it myself, like whenever I'm the most frustrated is usually when I've hit a wall. And I think it's natural in human nature to want to break through barriers, but it's hard to break through barriers more so because of the mental limitations that you have. And I think one of the hardest parts about doing that is just recognizing that you have a problem to begin with. So how do you recognize they have a problem? One, it could be like you're just so frustrated that you're fed up to the point where you will take action. I think two is a little bit tougher. It's a little bit trickier. It's just getting a temperature check. I like to call this a temperature check or a pulse check from the people that surround you. The people that know you well, that have seen how you behave, how you act. Because a lot of times we're scared to even ask what other people think. It's funny. We care a lot about what other people think, yet we're so afraid to just go straight up to a person and just ask, what do you think?
Interesting.
And not care.
Yeah. Or
take that information and use that feedback. Right?
Interesting.
We care so much about opinions of other people, yet we're so scared of feedback. The only opinion you should really take into account is critical, constructive feedback. That is actually the only thing you should care about. Everything else, I think, is not really productive or is misleading.
Or it's just an opinion.
Or it's just an opinion that paints the wrong picture. It doesn't paint the true picture. But real critical feedback is raw. It's painful. I don't know if you and I've had talks before. Like when I was on that edge, like should I leave? Should I not? From the company, and you asked me like, what is it that you're really afraid of, right? And I kind of like, what do you mean fear? Like I kind of had this sort of friction, this sort of like moment of like, I don't know, like what do you mean? There's no such thing as fear. But then I peeled the layers back, right? Because we ask those questions of ourselves. You have external feedback, and you have to be open to that hint, that kind of like, hey, like this is just an observation, but you should look into this observation. Then I realized, yeah, I kind of am limiting myself by not taking the action or speaking the truth that I want, And so I think that's a really, really critical point is be open to getting feedback, but don't treat feedback as law, but you've got to be open to soliciting feedback from others. That's the quickest way, I think, to know that you actually have a self-imposed limitation.
Yeah. Wow, that is...
Right?
Yeah, that's so good. That's like something that's actually really important that I think a lot of people miss. I think they're, like you said though, it's a very...
You have to fall into the trap.
Yeah, you want to fall in a trap where it's like you end up caring, or you ask and then you end up like falling into a hole of...
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like, someone, hey, should I start a podcast? Should I be on video? Like, I don't know. You have a resting bitch face. I don't know. Like, your voice sounds kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. You have no video editing skills. I don't think you should be doing this. But it's like, no. Those are opinions, But a constructive example of a feedback is, I think you can do it, but you should really watch your tonality and your expression when you're doing this. Then I think that'll give you a better chance of success. That's a more less opinionated like feedback, but it's a little bit more constructive because it shows you your weakness, but it's not telling you that you can't do this.
That's such a good distinction.
Yeah. Know your weakness, but never ever tell yourself you can't do something.
Wow.
Anything you want to add to that?
I want to leave it to that point because I just felt like that was super good, you know? I do want to pull it back one more step, right? And I think we're talking about this whole idea of self-imposed limitations, right? We haven't yet talked about why identifying and removing them is important, right? Now, you may have self-imposed limitations, and if you're happy with them, great. It's only a problem when you're unhappy and you're consistently frustrated, right? And you want more out of life, but you don't know how to get there, right? And there's a difference, right? Because some people, fine.
Who cares if I can't dunk a basketball, right?
Correct.
It's not my desire.
Exactly. And the truth is you may never be able to dunk a basketball, and you got to be okay with that and recognize your weaknesses. We're not saying that like you don't recognize your weakness, but with a lot of other things, you can break through those limitations. If you're unhappy and you're frustrated with them, you can always find a way to dive deeper to come out with a solution to fix it.
Right. Yeah. So I guess your point is making this is relevant to the thing that you want to overcome. Yeah. That you've hit a barrier. Yeah. If there are barriers in other aspects of your life, you don't need to break through every single barrier because maybe not all of those barriers are relevant to who you want to become and what you want to do.
Correct. I think that's really critical, and getting very hyper-focused on what that is first, and then kind of reverse engineering to say, great, what are my limitations that are preventing me from getting there? Right. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They don't start with that in mind, or they don't start with an idea in mind, and then kind of reverse engineer. They just kind of live however it is that they want, which is fine if you're happy, but if you're not and you're feeling lost, then create some clarity by setting with the end in mind so you can kind of reverse and peel back to see what those limitations are.
I'm going to add another layer on top of that, the reverse engineering part. I think when you do reverse engineer your end goal, that gives you that much more motivation in the beginning to even cross that line. Because again, like the hardest part is crossing that initial line. Once you've crossed that line, I think you're subconsciously at a point of no return. You're not turning back. Once you cross that line, you've burned the bridge, you move forward. There's only one way to go, which is forward. But you need a compelling force to pull you there. It's not enough to just jump over the line, but you don't even know why you jumped out of the line. Correct. There's got to be that force that matters to you, that goal, that mission that matters to you for you to cross that line.
Absolutely. And I want to put another emphasis point too. It may not be directly related to self-imposed limitations, but I think it's so important for people to hear this, is that set a goal, but don't make that goal be ultimately who you are and dictate your happiness. That's very important, because this idea of breaking through your self-imposed limitation is because you want to feel happy.
It's rooted in the search for happiness.
It's rooted in the search for happiness, for fulfillment, right? For love, whatever it is, a feeling of well-being, right? It's not this goal, right? This goal may help.
The goal is a tool.
It's a tool, right? To kind of help you go in the direction that you may want to go. But the second you get to that, you may end up finding that, hey, it wasn't actually the goal that makes me happy. It's the fact and the process of the inner working that I conquered myself to achieve that. But in reality, it was the journey and everything that I did and the process that I did within myself to conquer my fear, my uncertainty, my insecurities, is what ultimately brings that true happiness.
Exactly. And who's to say that when you reach that goal that you set for yourself a while back, that you won't have new limitations that you need to cross. You will have new self-imposed limitations every time you reach a new level or a new destination. And in that time is when you re-exercise your previous experience of crossing the initial barriers, the initial boundaries. And I think for the most part, it does get a little bit easier when you embark on that. I think the hardest one is the first barrier that you've got to break through, which is all right here. It's all up in here.
Yeah. And I think honestly, the easiest way to break through a self-imposed limitation, and it's going to sound very corny and cheesy, is you got to love yourself. Like if you hate yourself or you're unhappy and you're like super depressed, the likelihood of you breaking through your limitation,
0 to none.
0 to none, right? Because you're not going to want to do something. However, if you are in that position where you're very depressed, you feel like crap every day, you're waking up feeling unmotivated, a very easy way to get out of that is to take action and move your body.
Yes.
From a biochemistry perspective, if you exercise and you move your body, endorphins are released in your brain and you'll end up feeling a little bit happier. And being in that state, you'll be able to like do something about whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? But I think worst case scenario, you're not feeling good about yourself. All this talk of self-imposed limitations go right out the fucking window, right? If you're feeling depressed or if you're feeling unmotivated, go move your body.
It could be a symptom. You know, self-imposed limitation might not actually be the problem. It could just be a symptom of a greater underlying problem of your self-worth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think we covered a lot, but I think with everything that we talked about, how to break through this, I think it starts with your mindset, your emotional well-being, right? That's the first thing, is kind of understanding where you're at emotionally. And if you're at rock bottom, move your damn body. That's gonna really help. At least it helps me. And then like after that, it's kind of reverse engineering. Like, you know, what do you want? What do you want to happen, right? Truthfully, what you want to happen is happiness, but sometimes setting a goal can inspire you to move towards a direction, right? And I think a combination of all of that and doing that together will help you break through or motivate you to break through those self-imposed limitations.
100%.
Yeah.
If you guys like this video and if you guys made it this far, we thank you for watching our content. It would do us a huge world of a favor if you subscribed so that we can share more of this valuable content with you guys, and also click that notification bell for future stuff.
Awesome. And if you're listening as a podcast listener, go ahead and it would really help if you left a review. It helps us find more listeners like yourself.
Critical feedback.
Talking
in this episode.
Yes. And if you think anyone would find this episode useful, share it with them. We'd love to continue to build a community with listeners like yourself. And with that,
until next time.